Well, as you know, I'm completely neutral on this matter, not being a Conservative Party member, and I'm one of the 99.7% of the people who won't have a vote in this matter. So I can give you an objective view because I don't have a drum to bang. What I would say is I saw the debate last night on Sky, and I thought that Rishi Sunak actually came across pretty well and looked like Prime Minister material, whereas Liz Truss, who, of course, as you say, is a front runner, looked rather wooden, wasn't very good at answering questions, and was rather flat-footed. And I think the audience felt that way as well, because at the end, the vote was clearly for Rishi Sunak rather than Liz Truss.
Why do you think it's played out differently in that studio audience versus what we're seeing in some of the more national polling, like the recent one from YouGov?
Well, I think last night people had an opportunity to hear the candidates. They were well interviewed by Keir Burley, as a matter of fact. And I think Kay got under their skin in the sense that she actually made them reveal what they really thought about matters and pushed them on particular policies, and that was quite revealing. Whereas I think the national position is, to some extent, driven by opinion polls, driven by the Daily Mail and Daily Express, for example, who've been solid for Liz Truss from day one. So people only relying on those papers, for example, would have got a skewed opinion on how matters are. And obviously, as you mentioned at the beginning, we've now got cabinet ministers coming out in favour of Liz Truss. I mean, to be honest with you, without being too cynical, I think that's people who've decided what they think the result will be and are trying to bag a position in the cabinet when the election's all over.
So I'm curious, Norman. At the minute, we've got polls looking as though they're favouring Liz, as you've just said there. Yeah. But if last night is to be believed, it looks as though Rishi is building momentum. Now, there are 4-ish weeks to go until that result is going to come in. Ballot papers are landing as we speak. Do you think it's possible now for Rishi to turn it around?
Well, I think it would have been possible. I'm not sure it is now. And what's the difference? The difference is that we've now got to change to the rules because of the concerns by GCHQ about infiltration by unfriendly countries, no doubt Russia and China, about potential interference with the election process. That the Conservative members, who I understood at the beginning, had the option to recast their vote and change their vote if they wanted to near the time. That option has now been taken away. So we have the position now, as I understand it, where once people vote, that's it. And if people get kind of buyer's remorse in 2 weeks' time, it'll be too late.
Now, I want to go back to this kind of economic policy, because there's a clear difference, isn't there, between those two candidates? Yes. Now, you were part of the coalition government at a time when the focus really was on the economy, on paying down the deficit. So based on kind of your experience there and your current thoughts, who do you think does have the right idea on economic policy?
Well, as you say, it was a time when we inherited a bit of a mess from the Labour government in 2010, and the need to get the public finances in order was key to what the coalition did. And I think the coalition actually did it rather well over the 5-year period and was a very stable government. And part of that was indeed the economic approach that was adopted across the two parties. So given that, and looking where we are now, I think the situation for the economy is even worse than it was in 2010, partly because of COVID, of course, partly because of the Ukraine war, and dare I say to GBNews viewers, partly, I think, because of Brexit. But all those things together have made it a very, very challenging situation for the incoming Prime Minister and Chancellor. And of course, nothing's happening at the moment because the government's on autopilot until the results becomes clear. I think my instinct is to say that Rishi Sunak's approach to be careful is probably the right one. And people who are going to vote, Tory party members, I would advise them to not go for unwise jam today, but rather wiser jam in the future.
And final one, obviously, we're asking who our viewers trust to be the next Prime Minister. And trust in politics at the moment doesn't feel like it's in a good place. Based on your experience in office, do you think it's getting worse? And how can these candidates revive it?
Oh, it's getting a lot worse, I'm afraid. I'm partly responsible for it getting worse because I'm the MP, if you remember, who helped expose the abuse of MPs' expenses back in about 2008, 2009. And that was necessary to do that and to correct that. It has been corrected, as you all know. But it's left some lasting damage about the ability of people to believe what politicians do. And the fact that Boris Johnson, for example, sought to prorogue Parliament illegally and mislead the Queen hasn't helped that process of believing what politicians say. So whoever inherits this position as Prime Minister will have a huge challenge to deal with that. And my advice for them will be to get a cabinet of all the talents, if you were, across the Conservative Party rather than one faction. to involve Parliament more rather than trying to run this as a government which doesn't consult Parliament enough, and to be open and honest with what they're doing and to rebuild the trust that way with the public and to admit when mistakes are made as well.